Contreras, raised in El Paso, but I was actually born in Muleshoe, Texas. The reason for that is that my parents were at the time were living in Clovis, New Mexico. Uh, my understanding is that they were at a gathering of the nations in Oklahoma. And on their way back, they crossed through the panhandle of Texas when I popped out. I found out later that my aunts and uncles didn't know I existed till I was almost 2 years old. My mom never told anybody that she'd had me. After living in Clovis, I don't really remember much of that. I was too small, but we did move to El Paso in 1964. My father bought a house there on Globe Circle, and that's where we grew up. El Paso's always been my home since then. I haven't left to live anywhere else except for a short while. I lived in Silver City. As far as the cooking, I got into cooking by watching my mother and my father explain to us, when you grow to be a man, you will not always have a wife to take care of you. Sometimes you'll take care of yourself. So my father made sure to it that each of us knew how to cook before leaving the house. My father was a very educated man. He served in the military during World War II. He was a medic. He was also one of the first radio reporters that used to report the news in Spanish out of New Mexico. He started the first Hispanic or Mexican newspaper out of New Mexico. My father was also a minister, school teacher. We were raised in the church, Baptist. My mother, also from New Mexico, was a dietitian and also a nurse. She mostly took care of us while we were in school. Once we were all gone to school, she went to work again and continued working up until she died. I lost my father in 1985, my mother in 1991. The reason I got back into cooking was because my youngest son, Solomon, never got the opportunity to taste some of the foods that my parents had made for us and his older brothers. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to start making some of the recipes that I could remember for my son Solomon. And that got me into making the biscuits, sopapillas, tortillas, frijoles, enchiladas. There's another dish she asked me to make. I haven't made it lately. It's chicken and dumplings. I'm sorry. I can see my memory is not what it used to be. But that's actually how I got back into cooking. It was for my son. And then since my wife is now working and I am now retired, I decided to do most of the cooking at home. So I make sure to it that we have something to eat, whether it be chicken, fish, beans, rice, biscuits, sopapillas, chicken and dumplings, whatever. I don't mind cooking. In fact, I enjoy it. But some days not so much. In my household, my father and my mother both cooked. They were both very good cooks. Nobody has ever, and I can't even do it. I've tried many times and can't do it. Could match my father's menudo. He used to sit up all night and he would sit there and wash it and clean it and cut it just right. And oh my God, it was delicious. The smell was horrible. All menudo smells bad when you're cooking it, but it was delicious. My mom couldn't match it. Nobody could match my father's menudo, but both my mom and father cooked. My mom started that every day we had fresh tortillas, biscuits. We always ate a lot of beans, rice. We ate enchiladas, we ate chicken, we ate fish, we ate different stuff. My parents were big into camping when we were kids. They always took us camping. And I remember, in fact, my uncle still does it to this day. We pulled fish out of the river, the Gila. I like trout, rainbow trout. I got into rainbow trout. It's a good fish. And my father used to fish, and my uncle and all of us. And we'd clean the fish, freeze them, and bring them home. and we ate fresh fish. It was never store-bought fish. Of course, nowadays it's hard to get fresh fish. Everybody's got them at the delis, but it's, to me, not the same. Unfortunately, I can't hike anymore, so I don't get to do fishing. But as kids, we grew up camping every year. Like I said, my father was a minister, so every year we used to go to Cloudcroft, and there was this huge cabins. And there, everybody would get together and cook. All the adults would cook for the kids, and we'd run around and have fun. I remember the bears coming down at night and raiding our trash cans. I was still very small, so unfortunately I had to sleep with the women in their bunkhouse and never got to stay with my dad and my brother in the men's bunkhouse because I was still too small at the time. Later, when my father left the church and went back to teaching full time, we no longer went there, but we still went camping on a pretty regular basis. My aunt, my mom's sister, also same thing: fresh tortillas, beans, rice. In fact, my uncle made sure there was beans at every dinner. I don't care what they had. There was a pot of beans at his table. That's what we were raised, and that's what we grew up with, more traditional, I guess, Mexican-style food. I mean, I've eaten other stuff, like lasagna and stuff like that. My mom made it, but we spent most of our childhood eating mostly Mexican foods: beans, rice, enchiladas, tortas, chile rellenos, stuff like that. So we always had fresh tortillas. I just think it was funny. Those times I'd come home from work, but then do with my wife, and I'd get a call from my mother that, hey, stop by and pick up tortillas. I'm like, why are you making tortillas? And my sons would call my mom and say, hey, Dorothy, can you make us tortillas, please? So my mom would make them a big old stack of tortillas, and I was like, oh my God, you guys, my mom's old. Don't we make her do this stuff anymore? But I understand the tortillas. I wish my youngest got to eat them, but he never did. I can't do them as good as my mom. I try, but no cigar. And that's actually what my mom told me. She was that dough you make for your tortillas and your biscuits, you can also use to make sopapillas. And it tastes fantastic. Okay, I can say my father's side of the family were more Native American. That's when I think I was probably about 8 years old. I remember meeting, I want to say one of my dad's cousins and his wife was making what they called fry bread. And I said, hey, look, Mom, they're making sopapillas. She goes, no, mijo, that's fry bread. I said, what's the difference? And that's when I found the difference. Depending upon the native culture that you come from, some natives put a little bit of sugar in their dough to sweeten it just a touch. Some do not. But you fry it at a lower heat so it doesn't fluff as much. It's actually a little bit thicker, and that's called fry bread, and they're made in bigger pieces. And like, oh, okay, so I learned how to do fry bread. When I asked my dad about that, he told me, yes, son, he goes, our family reigns from the Mescalero Apache. My father's name was Daniel Contreras. His father's name, I believe, was Jesus Contreras. And my grandma's name I cannot pronounce. I think it was Aquilina Contreras. I'm not sure where they were from. I know it was New Mexico area. My father was born in Santa Rita in 1921. My mother, her name was Dorothy. She was born back then. It was called Malinesville. Her family owned mostly all of that property. They were a wealthy family. Unfortunately, I never met my mother's side of the family because they died when my mother was a young girl. And she, my Aunt Gloria, my Uncle Junior, and my Aunt Irene were raised by one of their uncles. But now the town is called, I want to say it's called Baird. And it's there by Fort Baird, New Mexico. But back in the day, it was called Malinesville because they owned most of that property. Like I say, my mother was a very good cook. She was also a dietitian and a nurse. Very educated woman, very loving woman. My parents were actually very mellow people. They didn't drink, they didn't smoke, they didn't cuss. I cannot remember my mother or father ever taking a hand to me or a belt to me. We weren't raised that. We were raised with love, not fear. So we had a good life. In fact, my wife said, "Oh my God, Paul, you had a Beaver Cleaver life." I said, "Well, if I did, I thank God for it."